Thank you for joining us. Our original date, if you were originally signed up, you know that we had some issues and were unable to proceed. So we are hoping everything goes good for us today. I'm talking about stone fruit, and let me get my PowerPoint up here so you can see just exactly what it is I'm talking about. Okay, preserving stone fruits, and they're just coming into the farmers markets and the grocery stores right now. Peaches are a very common fruit to can. And if you have a fruit tree, that makes it a very inexpensive way to put fruit up for your family. I want to talk a little bit about what a stone fruit is. So stone fruits, or they're also called drupes, are fruits with flesh or pulp that encase a stone. And let me cut this in half. This is a peach off of my tree, and this would be the stone, and this is the pulp. Some of the stone fruits that are pictured here are plums, peaches, nectarines, cherries. Mangoes are also a stone fruit. So there's a lot of different stone fruit. If you go online and look, you're going to get, depending on what website you're looking at, you're going to get other fruits and stuff. One thing I found interesting when I was doing some research on this is that almonds are also considered a stone fruit when they are in their green form. Supposedly, when you peel them, you can take the nut out and you eat the outside of that, and it's supposed to be really good. I think I'm going to pass on trying that, but you can look it up and see for yourself. Okay, when you get fruit, whether you purchase it or if you grow it, you need to make sure it's clean. Okay, produce can be contaminated by bacteria in the soil, and even though these grow on a tree, I know I have animals in my tree. I'm not sure what it is that loves to eat the peaches, but something enjoys them off of my tree. And of course, the birds, they don't care where they, pecking or pooping or anything like that. So you need to make sure that you clean it. Of course, there's human sources that are contaminants, kitchen surfaces, cutting boards, knives, everything needs to be clean. The way to clean these is wet each one under running water, rub its surface, rinse it, and dry it. Don't soak it because the skins are thin enough that water will leach into the fruit. When I do cherries, for instance, I rinse them and I put them in a sink full of water, and I immediately take them out and rinse them in cold water. And then I either put them in on a rack, or I put them in a colander and let them drain that way. So that way they're always clean and I don't have to worry about it. And when I start to do that, I always check each one before I put it in there to make sure that it's not bruised or pecked or anything like that. I'm going to kind of talk about each one separately. And these are some of the things that you can do with each of the stone fruit. Apricot is actually my favorite, and you can it, freeze it, dehydrate it. jams and jellies. You can make baked goods out of it. This picture here is a recipe that will be included in your handouts. It's a cookie recipe, and it's actually a recipe that is titled 5-ingredient blackberry bars. But because you're using a jar of jam, you are not limited to berries. You can use anything you want. And I have made them with the apricots, and it was really very good. Okay, cherries. Cherry season for me is just over. I am lucky to live right next door to a cherry orchard, and therefore I can get as many cherries as I like, though I don't really care for cherries. I do pick a lot for other people, but they are good for canning, dehydrating, jams and jellies. I have made the cookie bars with the cherry jam. I have a recipe that will be included for ice cream topping. My daughter usually makes cherry ice cream during cherry season. This year we picked over 200 pounds of cherries. So we have as many cherries as we want and then some. So I'm usually giving cherries away for quite a while. Peaches and nectarines, they also can be canned, frozen, dehydrated, jams and jellies. They're great in baked goods, peach pie. I like to make a mixed fruit pie during the year, and I always have peaches and apricots and nectarines and plums. And that's one of the ways I like to use them up, okay? White peaches and white nectarines. These are a different story. White peaches and white nectarines cannot be safely canned because they have a lower acid content, which is why people like them, because they're less acidic. They can be frozen or dehydrated. And one of the handouts that will be included is a little bit of information on white peaches and white nectarines. So while they're very good and tasty, they just can't be canned. I was disappointed when I was looking for specific information that a couple of the pictures I saw about canning peaches had white peaches in their pictures, and it's just not safe to can them. So be careful about that. You don't want to make anybody sick.
Colleen?
Yes.
Are they okay to make jam and jelly out of?
I didn't find anything that used white peaches or white nectarines. So I don't think I would try that.
Okay, thank you.
Just because I didn't find any approved recipes for that. Okay. The next one I want to talk about are plums, pluots, and aprons. And a plum, we all know what a plum is. A pluot is 75% plum and 25% apricot. Aprons are 75% apricots and 25% plums. So usually at the farmer's market, they have a wide variety of different types of the plums and pluots and aprons, though I've noticed that they'll either be categorized as plums or pluots. I always make plum jam. It's one of my family's favorites. So that's why I have a picture of the plum jam there. And they can be canned, frozen, dehydrated, jams and jellies, again, baked goods. So they're quite versatile. So I want to give you a little bit of general canning information. And I want to start with, after you wash your fruit and you've got all your canning stuff ready, you need to blanch some of your fruits. Now, not all fruits needs to be blanched. Plums don't need to be blanched. Apricots don't need to be blanched. Peaches, also apples and pears, they need to be blanched. So what you want to do is you want to get a pot of hot water. And once it starts to boil, you want to dip your peaches in there for about 40 to 60 seconds. And you want to work with only 5 or 6 peaches at a time. When you take them out of the boiling water, you want to put them in ice water. So that'll stop the cooking because you're not trying to cook them. So after you submerge them in ice water for about 30 seconds, then they're ready to peel. I remember helping my husband's grandmother peel peaches, and she didn't blanch them, but she had must have had 2 lugs full of peaches, and my hands hurt so bad from peeling them afterwards. I was wishing she had blanched them, but she didn't. Okay.
Colleen?
Yes.
When you hit, could you hit the, let's see, the space bar and not the mouse? Because every time you hit the mouse, we get a black bar across the top of the slide.
Oh, I am hitting the space bar.
Okay.
Okay, then maybe try it the other way. Try using your.
Oh, okay. I'll try it the other way.
Thank you.
And then let me know, okay? Okay, pre-treat. You want to pre-treat for better color. I don't have anything that hasn't been pre-treated, but this jar of apricots this jar is actually ready to use or throw out because it's almost 2 years old. But look how vibrant the color is. You also need to pre-treat if you're dehydrating. Now you don't have to, because you can, it's a personal preference. They're prettier if you pre-treat them, but some people don't like to do that. So I'm going to talk a little bit. Let me try this. How's that, ladies?
No, it still did it.
Still did it. Okay. Pre-treating is after peeling or cutting your fruit, you need to place it in a container that has a teaspoon of ascorbic acid, or 3,000 milligrams, or thoroughly crushed vitamin C tablets, and you want per gallon of water. You can also use like Fruit Fresh, and then you would follow the directions on the bottle. This is what I usually use. And you leave your fruit in that container soaking until you're ready to process it. Okay, this is a big bag of citric acid. Citric acid and ascorbic acid are not the same. Citric acid is more acidic, but ascorbic acid is better at preventing color changes in your fruit. So you can use citric acid. You can also use lemon juice in pre-treating, but if you want the best color, then you need to go with an ascorbic acid. Okay. Let me try this. How's that?
It worked. Whatever.
Well, that's what I was doing before, but we'll go with it, okay?
Okay.
Now, canning, these are canned, and there's several ways to can fruit. There's a hot pack where you place your drained fruit in boiling syrup or water or fruit juice. You don't have to use a syrup. You bring it to a boil, and then you fill the jars with the hot fruit and the syrup. You can also do a raw pack, which is where you fill the jars, your hot jars, with raw fruit, and then you pour syrup or hot water or fruit over the top. The difference is that if you'll notice the picture on the PowerPoint, they have some fruit float. Fruit float is caused by there's air in your fruit. If you don't cook your fruit, if it's not a hot pack that will help get rid of the air that's in the fruit, the raw pack has a tendency to have fruit float. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just the difference in the look of a hot pack and a raw pack. Okay, they're both processed the same. It's just that they look different. Also, you can usually get more fruit in a hot pack because the fruit has cooked the air out. And so when you put it in the jars, you can get more fruit in your jars. Okay, so that's something to consider. Freezing fruit. So you might want to pre-treat, like we were just talking about with the ascorbic acid. Peaches and apricots will get darker. So if you pre-treat them, then they'll help save that color. And you want to place your fruit in containers. You want to make sure that your containers are sturdy. This is a nice sturdy plastic container. I'm not even sure where I got it, but it's pretty thick. And I've used it to freeze several different things in it. The lid seals well. And then you can also always put some freezer tape over the lid to make sure your lid stays on. I like to do that because on my freezer tape, I can write what is in it and the date that I have used it.
Colleen,
Yes.
we had a question about blanching, and the person wanted to know, is the main reason for blanching, is it to make it easier to peel? But I think that is part of the reason, but isn't
That is part of the reason, yes.
But
yes.
the other part is to kill the bacteria on the surface of the fruit, right?
Yes, yes. And to to help for cleanliness, for sanitation, and to make it peel easily. The peaches that I have, this particular variety peels very easily. I usually go out in the morning and pick a nice fresh fruit, and I can just peel it while I'm standing out there. So this is a Red Haven. I have two other varieties, but this one is a really easy one to peel. So if you're going to plant something, the Red Havens come early in the season, and they're easy to peel. So I recommend those. If you're going to freeze in a jar, it's a good thing to use a wide mouth jar because whatever you put in here is going to expand. If you use a regular mouth jar, it has more of a shoulder, and it's possible that your fruit could break the jar. So you want to make sure that there's plenty of room for expansion. You can also freeze in a bag, and I'll talk about that in just a moment, or a plastic container that has a good fitting lid. Okay, so you can freeze your fruit in it's what's called a syrup pack, and that's where you add a syrup to cover your fruit, and that could be a fruit juice, or it could be a light or medium or heavy fruit or water and sugar syrup. And you want to leave a 1/2 inch headspace for a pint and an inch for quarts. There's also what's called a dry pack. In that, you would add 1/2 cup sugar for each quart of fruit. So you'd put your fruit in a bowl, you add the sugar and stir gently. You don't want to break your fruit up. And you stir it until the sugar dissolves. And you can mix a 1/4 teaspoon of ascorbic acid in 3 tablespoons of water and put it in there, and that'll help keep that vibrant fruit color. And you can place it in the containers like the plastic freezer containers, the glass, or bags. Okay, it's pretty easy. My favorite way to freeze fruit is the tray pack. So the tray pack is you put your fruit on a container, a cookie sheet. I put a piece of wax paper down and I add my fruit. And then once it's frozen, then I can put it in a bag or some other container, and I can easily take out as much fruit as I want. In this case, I have just started freezing my cherries. Let me pour some out here. And so they're nice and loose, and I can take out what I need and keep the rest in the freezer. So all I do is I put these on my cookie sheet, keep them in the freezer until they're frozen, which, you know, is an hour or so, probably less, but I usually do it for that long. And then I just put them in a bag, get the air out of my bag, close it up, and stick it in the freezer. And I can add fruit as I'm working on it, or I can remove some. Always on the bag, I will put what it is and when it was frozen, so that I know how old it is.
Okay, Colleen, there's a question about what is the difference of when you do it with sugar or without sugar? What does the sugar do for it?
The sugar makes it sweeter. So if I don't know what I'm going to use that fruit for, then I don't want to add sugar to it.
Okay,
Now,
so it doesn't make a difference in how well it lasts in the freezer or anything.
I think it does. I think it helps with the quality of the fruit if you add sugar to it.
Okay.
It's a way of preserving. It's just that my preference is not to do that. Okay, but you can do it. You can sugar your fruit and put it out on a tray pack and still freeze it like I do. It's just then that your fruit will have sugar on it. And depending on what recipe you use that for, you may or may not want it sugared. If you don't want it sugared and it is, all you have to do is rinse it off. So it's just an easy way to use your freezer to preserve your fruit. If you have specific recipes that you are packaging for, freezing or canning even, you can like this I have used for pie filling. You'll notice that it's just a pie pan with tin foil, and I will put my pie filling all ready to go in here, freeze this, and then once it's frozen, I'll take it out and put it in a Ziploc bag or something that wrap it up really well. And then I'll mark on it what it is. And then if I'm ready to make a pie, I can either use my pie crust that I'm making, or perhaps even a frozen pie crust, and just take it out and put it in there and it's ready to go.
One of the
sorry.
One of the things that I have learned to do is to make sure that I write on the outside of the container or the packaging what it is that is in the packaging, because you think you know it and you won't forget it, but sometimes you're standing there going, is this pumpkin or persimmon?
Yes. I a few months ago, well, probably 4 months ago, I took out of the freezer what I was sure was chicken, and it happened to be ham. So my chicken dinner turned out to be beans, which was fine, but it's, that's what happens when you don't put on the packaging what it is.
Okay, Colleen, I want to jump in really quick. This is Marcy. So according to one of the extension websites, sugar protects the texture of frozen food by suppressing the freezing point of water. When
Oh.
food that contains sugar is frozen, the product does not freeze as hard as plain water. The damaging effects of sharp ice crystals are lessened and texture is preserved. So sugar helps to preserve the texture and you don't get as many of those ice crystals on your fruit.
Yeah, very
Great.
good. Thanks, Marcy. And while I started talking about using a container to do my pies, I want to talk about fruit pie filling. So when you freeze pie, or excuse me, when you can pie filling, and I have a jar of peach pie filling right here, and I don't know if you can tell how nice and thick it is. Okay, so this is ready for me to pop the top and put in a pie pan or make a cobbler or anything that I want to do where I would use a thickened pie filling. But what you want to do is use the correct thickener. The thickener you want to use is clear gel. Okay, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more on the next slide. You do not want to use flour or cornstarch or tapioca. If you want to use those things, then you need to use them for a frozen pie filling, not a canned pie filling. You shouldn't use flour, cornstarch, or tapioca to thicken anything that you're canning unless the recipe specifically calls for it. So you don't want to use that in your pie filling. You can, if you want, if you don't want to thicken it, you could take your jar of fruit and thicken it right after you open it and you're ready to make a pie with it. So you don't have to thicken it. You can use your canned fruit, but if you want to can pie filling, go ahead, you can, and use clear gel. I started doing this for my granddaughter who loves to make cobbler and stuff. So I started doing canned pie filling for her, and she absolutely loves it. Okay, so what is clear gel? So clear gel is a modified food starch that is used as a thickening agent in canning recipes. What clear gel does that other thickeners don't do is you can heat it up more than one time. So when I use this in my pie, I know that once my pie has cooled, my filling will not be runny. Also, the clear gel does not lump. It won't get lumpy for you. So it'll be a nice filling for you. The clear gel, and there's two different kinds. This is the original, and you can use it for your pie filling. You can also make jam out of it. If you can look online and find out how you can make jam. I haven't done that yet, but it's on my list of things to do, just to see how it turns out. Instant clear gel will thicken foods without heat. You don't have to use it to heat it up. Clear gel you can use to thicken sauces for gravies and stuff. Instant clear gel does not work well for canning because it breaks down when heated for long periods of time. You can use it to thicken a sauce if it's just a short amount of heat, and it works fine. But if you want to make a pie filling or something like that, the regular or original clear gel can be heated several times, because when you're doing pie filling, you're heating your filling, then you're putting it in the jars, and then you're heating it again when you can it. And then when you go to bake your pie or whatever you're using it for, you're heating it again. So that's 3 times the heat you're putting this through. So you want to make sure that it comes out nice and thick by the time you're done with it. And that's what the clear gel does. It is, unfortunately, it is not available in grocery stores. If you're lucky enough to have a place that deals with canning supplies near you, then you can probably get it there. I get this online at Amazon, and I think this is my third container of it. So, and it lasts quite a while. I did see there is a date on here, best by October 16th, 2021. So, but I have seen in a lot of places that it does well after that as well. Okay. Freezing pies. You can bake a pie and then freeze it. You can make a pie and then freeze it. Or you can, like I was talking earlier, make your filling separate. Okay. Freezing baked pies unbaked pies, you're going to get more flavor, because fruit flavor, but the crust has a tendency to get soggy. So if that's one of the reasons that you might want to freeze your filling separately. You bake just as usual, and you allow extra time for the fruit to heat through. One of the handouts that will be included is a handout from Penn State that talks about making fruit pies and the clear gel and how to cook them. But they're just done as usual with enough time for your fruit to heat through. You don't need to cook the fruit because it's already cooked. Okay? All right. Drying stone fruit. So you want to make sure when you dry anything that it's a good fresh quality. You want to wash it and remove the stems and the pits. You want to make your pieces relatively the same size. You want them to be uniform because they will dry at the same rate. A friend of mine, Kathy Anderson, has done a lot of dehydrating, and she added these slides for me in the drying fruit. And when I was looking at them yesterday as I was reviewing everything, I saw this the third point there where you can syrup blanch or honey dip, and I had not heard of those before. Syrup blanch, what I read about it is that it makes it kind of candy-like, though it's not that sweet, nor is it that hard. So it looked like what I saw was you take 1 part sugar, 1 part corn syrup, and 2 parts water, and then you blanch your fruit in that. So that was kind of interesting. I'm going to have to ask her if she's ever tried it. She's never mentioned it, so I'm not sure. It's kind of an interesting concept. I looked it up online and learned something new. So you might want to try that. You need to dry your fruit at 135 degrees Fahrenheit for about 12 to 36 hours. And you might want to turn your larger pieces over every 3 to 4 hours so that they dry evenly. Let me go back here. Okay. Cherries. This is what I have dried this year. And I have it in jars to condition. This is what they look like. I cut them in half. The cherries that I have access to are very big. Usually these are called garnets. But I don't know. This is the first time I've done it, so I'm a little nervous. They're softer than I thought they would be, but then I try to remember that it's like a raisin. Okay, the color is good, and they have pretty concentrated cherry flavor. So I'm hoping that after I'm done conditioning them, and I'll talk about them in just a moment, that I can cut them up maybe a little smaller and use them in baked goods. Okay, let me see if I can go back here. There we go. Apricots. You don't need to peel apricots. You want to remove the pit, and you can either slice them into the sizes you're looking for or leave them halved. It says whole here, but you want to leave them halved. You want to arrange them in a single layer. And this goes with the cherries as well, or all fruit. If you are putting it, if you're leaving it the peeling on, you want to put them peel side down so that they're less likely to stick to whatever it is that you're dehydrating them on. So if you're doing it on a silicone pad or on just a rack, whatever it is, you want them peel side down, okay? And always in a single layer. Here's cherries again. It says to dip whole cherries in boiling water for 30 seconds to crack the skin. If you don't do that, the moisture has nowhere to go and it takes longer and you may not be as successful in drying cherries. Like I said, I cut mine in half, so I didn't have any issues with that. Okay. Peaches, oh, 2 ends and nectarine, okay. Nectarines you want to wash and peel. The peel may become bitter or discolored during the drying. So you want to cut them in slices or in quarters, or I would probably, quarters would be a little big to get them to dry, and arrange on a single layer with the pit side up. And you want to turn them over when the juice that gathers on the top disappears. Okay. Plums, pluots, and abrams. You don't need to peel them. You can slit the skins to promote drying if you'd like to do that. I would cut them in half or quarters or whatever. Here again, if you leave them whole, you need to crack the skins in boiling water. This says for 1 to 2 minutes, and then put them in cold water like you were blanching them, so that so that the moisture can get out of the fruit. So that's your what you want to happen. But if they're not peeled or the skins aren't cracked, then that moisture doesn't have any way to escape the fruit. So you want to make sure and do that. The same thing with blueberries, even though we're not talking about blueberries. Testing for readiness. When you think your fruit is done, you want to turn off your dehydrator, and you want to let it cool. The fruit should be pliable and leathery and no visible moisture, okay? Now, I'm conditioning, it says condition for 4 to 10 days and store them when you're done in an airtight container. My tongue is sticking to the top of my mouth, okay. Conditioning. Dried fruit should be about 20% moisture, so it's not totally dry. The moisture could be unevenly distributed depending on whether or not your fruit is approximately the same size or not. That's why you want to keep it uniform. So the conditioning, which is putting it in a jar, no more than 2/3 full. And every day you need to shake it and look for moisture. It could be on the lid or on the jars. This jar is a particular good one for me to try because it has a nick in it. So I can't use this for canning any longer, but I can certainly use it for conditioning. Okay, so after about 10 days, then you'll know that it's dry. If you do find moisture, you can put it back in your dehydrator and dry it for a few more hours, depending on how much moisture you find, and maybe another day. Okay, these I dehydrated for 30 hours. Like I said, my cherries are big, so it took a little longer, and I was a little nervous about it since it was my first time. Okay. So here's a little more on the conditioning. So what you just need to do is watch for any moisture. I just put these in here today, and I haven't had any moisture yet. Okay. These are some reliable resources, and the PowerPoint will be available for you. And this is about the San Joaquin County Master Food Preservers, okay? How we can be contacted. Maybe you would be interested in joining the Master Food Preservers. We have a lot of fun. We learn a lot of things. And anybody that's interested, we would certainly welcome you to join when we have another class. Our next presentation will be in the 17th of July, and we're doing pickles. So hopefully you'll be able to join us for that. Okay, I have a short little video that I'm going to present you, and it is making apricot jam. Okay, let me see if I can get out of here. There we go. Let me close this. All right. This features our Master Food, Linda.
Colleen, we can't see the video. We're still seeing your
Oh,
PowerPoint.
you can't see it? Okay.
Stop sharing and
Yeah, let me stop sharing. Okay.
We can't
Stop,
hear
stop,
you.
stop. Let me start it over. Okay. Let me see here. Escape. Zoom. Share screen. There we go. Okay. All right. How about now, Marcy?
Hi there. My name's Linda Driver.
you're good. Did you remember to share this audio though?
Yes, I did.
Master Food Preserver. And today I want to
Is it working?
talk to you about how to put
Yes.
a batch
Okay,
of apricot
And I'm
jam.
wearing the same shirt.
I see that.
You have one tree, you will get more apricots than you can eat, than your family can eat, and all your friends can eat. What do you do with all the rest of the apricots before they start falling on the ground and you have to pick them up? Well, making a batch of jam is one of the things you can do. Before we start, one of the things that you should always do when you're working in your kitchen is make sure that you wash your hands. And I think at this point in time, almost everybody in the world knows how, but just in case, you turn on running water, set it to form, you get some soap, you lather up, and once you have a good lather going, you start washing your hands. You wash both sides of your hands. You wash between your fingers. You wash around your nails. You remember watching TV shows with doctors getting ready for surgery. They spend a lot of time on their nails. If you have a nail brush, you can use that to work around that area too. What you're trying to do is get all the places where germs, which could be on your hands, and your hands touch everything, can hide out. You also want to make sure you kind of go up around your wrist. And you should do this long enough that you could have sung Happy Birthday twice, or the alphabet song. I think everybody knows those two. But that's about the amount of time, 20 seconds at least. And after you've gotten done with all of that, then you have clean hands. And to maintain the cleanest hands, you should probably use a paper towel to dry your hands off with. Or a freshly washed towel. So, now we've done that, let's talk about the equipment that we're going to need today to make apricot jam. Whenever you are making jam or jelly, you can use the stuff that you have in your kitchen already. You really don't have to have any specialized equipment. Today I'm going to use this great big frying pan that I have because I want you to be able to see the process. Normally, if I'm making jam, I use a big pan like this that's nice and deep because you have a whole lot of ingredients that's going into your jam, and you need to bring it to a rolling boil, which requires you to stir and not be able to stir down the bubbles, and that usually takes a lot of room. But today, because I want you to be able to see what we're doing, I'm going to use that pan. Now, for processing your jars, there are two things. You're probably more familiar with the water bath canner, and that's what this thing is. They usually are either galvanized, they're usually aluminum or enamelware. They usually have a rack in the bottom that you can sit the jars on, and then you can immerse it, and it goes down, and you put water in, and the water goes all around the jars and over the top of the jars. If you don't have one of those, you don't have to. If you can get some extra rings, and you can put them together with wire ties off of your bread bags, and you can make a thing that will go in the bottom of your pot, and you can sit your jars on top of this. The key thing is that your jars are not sitting on the bottom of the pan, and that you can have water all around the jars. Now that's for a water bath canner. I am going to use today a steam canner. And a steam canner uses less water. You can actually get more jars in a steam canner than you can a regular water bath canner. And it brings it up to a boil. And when the gauge on the top of the steam canner gets into the green zone, that's when we start counting our time. So these jars are in here because I use the steam canner to sterilize them so that they are ready for the jam when we're ready to do that. Other pieces of equipment that you're going to need a spoon. Usually, many people use a funnel to fill their jars. I prefer to pour them in, but we'll demonstrate both. This is a handy dandy device. This is well worth having. This is used to pick up your jars and move them from hot to where they sit and cool without burning your fingers. A really good thing. We also need timers. This is a timer that measures 1 minute. And we're going to need that when we are bringing our pectin and our fruit up to its first boil before we add the sugar. This one measures longer amounts of time, and we will use that when we're doing our processing time. Then the other things that you will need to make apricot jam. I'm using a blender. You could use a food processor. You could chop it up with your knife, but the blender is easier. Because we are making jam, we don't have to have big pieces of fruit. We actually really want smaller pieces of fruit so that it will spread nicely on your toast. You're going to need liquid measuring cups. You're going to need a dry measuring cup to measure things like your sugar. And let's see, we have the lids and rings that we're going to need. We need, for the recipe, we need lemon juice, a little dab of butter, the apricots, sugar, and pectin. One of the things that people don't know, if they haven't made jam or jelly a lot, is not all pectins are the same. So when you are buying your pectin, whatever kind you buy, you must read the recipe and follow the recipe. Don't change the recipe. If you change it, you may not get what you want, and it may not be safe. Most packages of pectin have instructions for how to make your jam, and then they have various recipes that tell you how many apricots to buy, what you have to do to them, how much sugar you need, all the things that you need. So, I think we are ready to start. As you can see, I had previously started preparing the apricots because it takes a little while to do that. Now, when we're talking about making jam or jelly, what you want in your fruit is you want fully ripe apricots. So you want apricots that you would not mind eating right now. You do not want to put in the jar. If you have ones that have bruises or something, you want to cut those out. That's not something you want. But when we are making apricot jam, one of the nice things about it, apricots have nice big seeds. They are part of what is called stone fruits. And stone fruits are cherries, peaches, nectarines, apricots, pluots, and some of the other varieties they made. But you have a relatively big, hard seed for the size of the fruit. And apricots are very easy, as you can see, to get prepared. Because you're making jam, you don't have to take the skin off. There are some things that you do have to take the skin off, but this is not one of them. So, I am going to finish opening the rest of these and put them in the blender. The recipe calls for 5 cups of blended apricots. And so, we are right there. So the recipe calls for 5 cups of apricots and 1/4 cup of lemon juice. So I added lemon juice to the stuff that I had pre-done so that it would not turn brown, because that's the purpose of the lemon juice in this recipe. Fruit prepared. We need to put it in the pan we're going to cook in, and we need to add the package of pectin, and we will need to thoroughly stir that in. And we also will add a little dab of butter, because what that does is it cuts down on foam. Okay, so we added the package of pectin and a little dab of butter. And now we stir it in, and we keep stirring because we've got this on high heat because we want to bring it up to temperature quickly. That's what it says to do. And we do not want it to burn. So one way to get it to burn is to forget to keep stirring and to go off and do something else. Not a recommended thing. It's been about 4 minutes, and the apricot and the pectin mix is coming to a boil. And all it has to do, I don't have to have it at a boil for a long time, but it's there right now if I leave it alone for a minute, but I don't want to leave it because it will burn. The apricot stuff has come up to a boil, and Now I'm going to add the sugar, and you add the sugar all at once, and you get busy stirring, because you do not want it to burn, and you do want it to mix in. And I'm pushing my luck with this thing because it's full pan. So it has been about 10 minutes now, and the sugar and apricot mixture has gotten to the place where it is considered a rolling boil. So since it's a rolling boil, it needs to cook for 1 minute. So I'm going to turn my timer over here and wait until it gets to the bottom. If you don't have a timer, you can count to 60. One for every turn around the pan. But I've got a timer, so I'm going to use that. You can also use your phone, whatever, for a 1 minute timer. But you do not stop stirring. The 1 minute timer has run out, so I'm turning the heat off. And I'll keep stirring for a minute or so more just to let it settle down. And then I will skim the foam off the top. Okay. The foam, there's nothing wrong with the foam. It tastes good. I put it in a bowl like what I'm doing right now and put it on my toast the next day. But it is prettier in the jar if you don't have foam. So that's why we scoop it off the top. Okay, so we're taking our jars out of the steam canner and take them over to where we're going to fill them. So now we need to fill the jars, and we need to pay attention to how much apricot jam we put in each jar. And this is one of the places where it helps if you can be really neat. Now, that's what the funnel is for, and many people use it. But I find I would really rather do it without the funnel. So I'll show you what it looks like without the funnel. Okay, after we've filled all the jars, then we want to go around and wipe the rims to make sure they're clean. And before we've done that, we should go around and make sure that we have 1/4 inch of headspace, which is what is required for these. And so if you put this handy dandy little device in there and it just almost touches the top of the jam, you're in good shape. So we do that, and then we put the lids and rings on the jars. Modern lids don't need to be preheated. Older ones in the past had to be, but they've got a better sealant these days. So you put it on, you put the ring on, and you tighten it to finger tight, which is just like that. And we will do all of those, and then we'll move them to the steam canner for processing. Okay, so now we're going to turn the heat on under the steam canner. We've got our jars sitting here. They're not touching each other. There's room for the steam to flow around them. And we put the lid on the steam canner, and we put the vent on the opposite side of where we are, because we don't want to have that coming up where we look at it. And that is one of the indicators that you're ready, is when there's a solid stream of steam coming out the back. And then the handy dandy gauge on the top. When the little arrow gets to the green, then we start counting time. And it's going to be 10 minutes for apricot jam. And before I forget to mention it, apricot jam is very slow to set, so it may take up to 2 weeks before it sets enough for you to call it jam. You might be thinking it's syrup, but don't think you failed until you wait long enough to see if it will actually be jam. Okay, our timer has gone off, and so our jam has processed for the right amount of time. So I'm going to turn off the heat, and I am going to remove the lid carefully, and just let it sit here and rest for 5 minutes before we move it to where it's going to sit for the next 24 hours undisturbed. And I probably will leave it there for the entire 2 weeks that I'm waiting for it to gel completely, so that it is jam and not syrup. So this is our apricot jam. Okay, after our 5-minute rest, we lift the jars out of the 16 canner, and we set them at the side, and we will not disturb them for at least 24 hours. And when I'm ready to put them on the shelf, I will put a label on top that says what it is and when I made it, so that later on when I'm going, what is this, I will know. Thank you very much. Happy canning.
All right. All right. I hope everybody learned something from that. Thank you, Linda. I have some different types of pectin here that I wanted to show you. This is a liquid pectin. I actually used it for the first time this year. I made some sweet cherry ice cream topping. This is one of the recipes that will be included in the handouts. This is a full sugar pectin, okay? And this is my preferred pectin, and it is a low or no sugar pectin. You want to make sure that if you're making jam, you do not cut the pectin. Excuse me, you do not want to cut the sugar. If you want a low or no sugar jam, then please use the low sugar or no sugar pectin. The sugar is part of the preserving process. And if you do not use the amount of sugar that is used in the pectin, you run the risk of having a product that may not come out like you want and could definitely be unsafe. Okay. Another recipe that you're going to get is a sweet cherry jam recipe. And this is a new product for me this year. I always make cherry jam, but this year I tried a different recipe that my friend Diana, who helped me on this on this presentation, found, and it is spiced. So it has, I want to say, cinnamon and clove. It called for a liqueur that I didn't have, so I used a teaspoon of almond extract. Now remember, you can add flavorings and it doesn't affect your product. It just gives more flavor to them. You just don't want to mix things without having a recipe to do that. Another one of the recipes that I have included is a cake recipe, a peach cake recipe, and it uses a pint jar of peaches. It calls for a can of peaches, which is 15 ounces, and that's about what you're going to get in a pint of home canned fruit. And let me tell you, this is going to be much more flavorful than you are going to get from commercial canned product. I just wonder if there's any questions that you have, or now here's a thing about Pomona. Pomona is another one that I have not used, another pectin. I have a cookbook for it, but what I have learned is that it has, you can change the amount of sugar to your taste, but it doesn't last as long either in storage or once it's opened. And as it is that the low sugar doesn't last as long opened or on the shelf as the regular pectin does. So you can use less sugar by using a less sugar product, but it won't last as long. I have not had a problem with it, but just keep that in mind. Okay. Are there any other questions or comments that we need to talk about? Linda, is there anything?
Colleen, we have a question. Pat wants to know, She wants to make an apricot peach chutney, but the recipe calls for dried apricots. Can she use fresh fruit?
I would follow the recipe.
I'm the chutney queen.
Yes,
So
Linda is the chutney queen.
So I'll go and look in my chutney reservoirs and see if I can find one that has for fresh fruit. But it'll take me a while.
Yeah, Linda is our chutney person, and she knows all about that. I don't do chutney very often, but some of her stuff is really good.
No, you cannot. Well, it depends. The question is, can you substitute fresh lemon juice for bottled? It depends on what the lemon juice is being used for.
No, it was apricots.
No,
Fresh
the question is, can you substitute fresh lemon juice for bottled?
Okay.
And I, as a master food preserver, if it's in the recipe, well,
You need to use the bottled because of the consistency of the acidity.
I was thinking though, and maybe I'm wrong on this, but I was thinking that if the only purpose was for the to preserve the color, if that was its sole purpose,
Right.
if it did not have any part of the preserving, just
Right.
preserving the color,
Right. Yeah.
then it would probably be okay. But and Colleen is correct. The reason why we use the bottled is because it's consistent. You know what you're going to get.
Yeah.
It's always the same.
So for instance, if you were doing tomatoes, you definitely want to use bottled because you need that acidity. Okay. Anything else that I can answer, or let's see here. Put my glasses on.
Okay.
Yeah, the Pomona pectin, I have only seen it online. I have been told that sometimes Winco has it, but I don't know about that. And Rita was stressed about the wasted running water. Well, you can collect that water and water your plants with it. That's what I do. I always have a bucket in there in my sink, and then I just use that for watering my plants, so it's not wasted, especially in this drought.
Yeah. But you do want to have your hands clean.
Yes.
And your fruit
Definitely.
clean.
Yes.
I'm going to go back to the chutney thing, and I would say use the dried apricots. If the rest, because unless you can find an approved recipe that uses fresh, but
Right.
I'm not finding one.
Well,
The one I have has dried apricots as well.
Yeah. The dried apricots are going to give you more apricot flavor, and the texture between the dried and the fresh would be different as well. But
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to chance it by using the wrong, and the fresh apricots would cook down more, and I just don't know that it would be as safe as the dried.
Yeah.
And that's what you're looking for, is safety.
Yeah.
I think another thing too, to add to that with the fresh peaches and dried apricots, is the seasonality of those two fruits. That typically, it's hard, like if you're talking about backyard trees, apricots are typically done as peaches start coming into season. So that may be another reason too why
Right.
I recommend dried apricots is that.
And they're a little milder flavored in general. So the dried would be more flavorful.
Yeah. So sorry, Pat, you got to get the dried apricots.
But we have a terrific video on dehydrating. So you might want to check that out if you haven't done that before. Or I have found dried fruit of a reputable company at the 99-cent store. So check that.
Yeah. Somebody asked earlier, and I answered in the chat about dehydrators. And my personal experience is they can range from $0 to several $100s. And I've bought them for I had one that I paid $5 for, one I paid $20 for, and one I bought for somebody else I paid $20 for, and I got them all at estate sales. So,
Yeah.
and a friend of mine just got one for free on one of the free cycle things. So.
I see a question about using frozen peaches to make jam, and that's fine. You do need to thaw them. And you may want to drain them if there's a lot of juice. I usually make my mixed berry jam on just a package of mixed berries that I buy at the grocery store. It's cheaper. Berries are expensive unless you're growing them yourself. And so I find that a bag of mixed berries, which is what I usually use, is cheaper, and I just thaw them a little bit, and then I make my jam from there, and I've never had any trouble with it.
I think also the question they asked, I think you would want to measure it after it had thawed.
Yes, yes. Measure it afterwards, because the frozen fruit isn't going to
Smush.
nestle. Yeah, it's just gonna stay frozen. So you want to measure it afterwards.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Not seeing any new questions.
Yeah, I was kind of looking, so I think we're good. I hope everybody learned something, and watch for those recipes and the handouts for more information, especially on the pie filling. The handout has lots of pie fillings, and you can make 1 quart or you can make 7 quarts. So that's really helpful if you just want to try one to see how it goes for you. And remember that even though it says pie filling, you can make anything you want out of it. Okay?
Okay. All right. I think we're good.
Yeah, I think so. Thank you for joining us tonight.